Have you ever wondered why so many Americans, even those living in comfort and security, still wake up every morning with a sense of unease? In a country built on the promise of happiness, where the pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness is written right into the Declaration of Independence, why do so many people feel like something is missing? It's a strange paradox. We live in an age where more people than ever have access to modern conveniences, stable jobs, and the kind of material wealth that would have been unimaginable to our ancestors. Yet, anxiety and dissatisfaction seem to be everywhere. Think about it. The United States has always been a land of ambition. From the gold rush to Silicon Valley, Americans have chased dreams, built fortunes, and shaped the world. But somewhere along the way, the pursuit of more became a double-edged sword. We're told that if we just work harder, buy more, and achieve more, happiness will follow. But for millions, that happiness never quite arrives. Instead, it's replaced by a quiet, persistent anxiety, a feeling that no matter how much you have, it's never enough. Philosophers have tried to explain this for centuries. Arthur Schopenhauer, a German thinker whose ideas influenced American writers like Emerson and Thoreau, once said that life is a constant swing between wanting something and being bored once you have it. It's a cycle that plays out in American life every day, from Wall Street to Main Street. And it's not just about money or success. Even people with loving families, good health, and stable careers can feel trapped by a sense of restlessness they can't explain. So what's really going on? Why do so many people, even in the land of opportunity, feel like they're drowning in shallow water? The answer might be older than America itself. It's a hidden trap that's been quietly shaping lives for generations, a kind of suffering that doesn't come from the outside world but from the mind itself. And once you see it, you can never unsee it. The paradox of having it all. America has always been obsessed with the idea of having it all. From the earliest days of the nation, the American dream promised that anyone, no matter where they started, could build a life of comfort, security, and happiness. For generations, families worked tirelessly, believing that a bigger house, a better job, or a fancier car would finally bring peace of mind. But as the decades rolled on, something strange happened. Even as more people reached those milestones, the sense of satisfaction they expected never quite materialized. Take a look at the suburbs that sprang up after World War II. These neighborhoods were designed to be little slices of paradise: white picket fences, green lawns, and the promise of a better life for every family. Yet, behind those closed doors, countless Americans found themselves struggling with a quiet sense of emptiness. The pressure to keep up with neighbors, to climb the corporate ladder, to provide the perfect life for their children, it all added up. The more people achieved, the more they felt they had to lose. And with every new possession or promotion, the bar for happiness seemed to move just a little further out of reach. This paradox isn't just a modern problem. It's woven into the fabric of American culture. In the 1920s, during the so-called Roaring Twenties, the country experienced an explosion of wealth and innovation. Jazz music filled the air. Skyscrapers rose in every city, and consumer goods flooded the market. But beneath the surface, anxiety simmered. The stock market crash of 1929 revealed just how fragile that sense of security really was. Suddenly, millions who thought they had it all were left with nothing but uncertainty and fear. Fast forward to today, and the story hasn't changed much. Social media has only amplified the pressure. Now, it's not just your neighbors you're comparing yourself to, it's everyone, everywhere, all the time. You scroll through endless feeds of smiling families, exotic vacations, and career milestones, and you wonder, why don't I feel as happy as they look? The truth is, you're not alone. Studies show that rates of anxiety and depression have soared in recent years, especially among people who, on paper, seem to have every reason to be content. So what's missing? Why does the pursuit of the American dream so often leave people feeling anxious and unfulfilled? The answer isn't found in a bigger paycheck or a nicer house. It's something deeper, something that can't be fixed by chasing after more. And until you understand what's really going on inside your own mind, no amount of success will ever feel like enough. But there's a reason for this hidden dissatisfaction, a reason that goes beyond culture, history, or economics. It's a universal human experience, and it's been quietly shaping American lives for centuries. In the next section, we'll meet someone who seemed to have it all, yet still felt trapped by invisible chains. Her story might sound familiar because in many ways it's the story of America itself. Priya's story begins. Let's step into the life of Priya, a woman whose story could easily belong to any American suburb. Priya was 38, living in the heart of the Bay Area, surrounded by the kind of success that generations of immigrants had crossed oceans to find. Her home was nestled on a quiet street lined with maple trees, the kind of neighborhood where kids ride bikes until sunset and neighbors wave from their driveways. She had two bright, healthy children, a husband who adored her, and a career that paid well, enough to afford family vacations and the occasional splurge at the local farmer's market. On the outside, Priya was living the American dream. But every night, as the city lights of San Francisco flickered in the distance, Priya would lie awake, her mind racing. She'd stare at the ceiling, heart pounding, as 1,000 what-ifs crowded her thoughts. What if her son failed his exams? What if her husband realized she wasn't good enough? What if she lost her job in the next round of layoffs? The questions never stopped. Even in moments of peace, family dinners, weekend hikes, lazy Sunday morning, her mind was always 10 steps ahead, scanning for the next crisis. This wasn't the life Priya's parents had imagined when they first arrived in America decades ago. Like so many before them, they'd come seeking opportunity, believing that hard work and sacrifice would guarantee happiness for their children. And in many ways, they'd succeeded. Priya had everything they dreamed of: stability, respect, a future full of promise. But the pressure to live up to that legacy weighed on her shoulders like an invisible burden. She felt guilty for not feeling grateful, ashamed for not being able to enjoy the life she'd built. Her family noticed the change. Her husband would gently remind her, "We're okay, Priya. You don't have to worry so much." Her children, wise beyond their years, would say, "Mom, just relax, we're happy." But the more they tried to reassure her, the more isolated she felt. It was as if she was drowning in shallow water, close enough to the surface to see the sunlight, but unable to break through and breathe. Priya's story is more common than you might think. Across America, millions of people are quietly fighting the same battle. They have the house, the family, the job, and yet every morning they wake up with a tightness in their chest, a sense that something is deeply wrong. It's a silent epidemic, one that doesn't show up in family photos or social media posts, but lingers in the quiet moments when the world isn't watching. What Priya didn't know was that her suffering had a name, a concept that's been discussed for thousands of years, from ancient Buddhist texts to modern psychology. It's a kind of suffering that doesn't come from the outside world, but from the relentless chatter of the mind. And until she understood this, no amount of success or reassurance could set her free. In the next section, we'll explore the invisible prison that traps so many Americans, even those who seem to have it all. Priya's journey is just beginning, but her struggle is one that echoes through the history of the American dream, a dream that promises everything, but sometimes delivers anxiety instead of peace. The invisible prison. Priya's struggle wasn't just personal, it was part of a much larger, often invisible crisis woven into the fabric of American life. For generations, Americans have been taught to believe that happiness is just around the corner, waiting at the end of hard work and perseverance. But what happens when you reach that corner and still feel empty? This is the invisible prison that traps millions, a prison built not of bricks and bars, but of thoughts and expectations. In the United States, the idea of suffering is often misunderstood. We tend to think of suffering as something obvious: losing a job, facing illness, or enduring tragedy. But there's a subtler kind of suffering that's just as real, even if it's harder to see. In Buddhist philosophy, this is called dukkha, a word that doesn't translate perfectly into English. It's not just pain or sadness, it's the nagging sense that something is always a little off, that life never quite lines up the way we want. American history is full of stories about chasing happiness and coming up short. During the Great Depression, families lost everything overnight, but even in the boom years that followed, many found that prosperity didn't erase their worries. In the 1950s, the rise of suburbia promised comfort and security, but it also brought a new kind of anxiety: the fear of not measuring up, of falling behind, of missing out on the good life everyone else seemed to have. The pressure to be perfect, to always be achieving, became its own kind of prison. Priya was living in that prison. Even if she couldn't see the walls, her suffering wasn't the obvious kind. She wasn't facing disaster or loss. Instead, her mind was constantly spinning, turning every good moment into a source of worry. When her children laughed, she wondered how long their happiness would last. When her husband smiled, she feared it might fade. When her job was stable, she worried about the next round of layoffs. It was a cycle that never ended, a wheel that kept turning no matter how much she achieved. This invisible prison is especially common in a country that values self-reliance and achievement above all else. Americans are taught to push through discomfort, to fake it till you make it, to keep striving no matter how tired they feel. But sometimes the harder you push, the tighter the prison becomes. The mind, left untrained, becomes its own worst enemy, always searching for problems, always preparing for disaster, never able to rest in the present. Priya's experience is a reminder that suffering isn't always about what's happening outside. Sometimes it's about the stories we tell ourselves, the expectation we carry, and the relentless drive to be more, do more, have more. It's a uniquely American dilemma, born from a culture that celebrates ambition but rarely teaches how to find peace. But there's a way out of this invisible prison. It starts with recognizing that the mind, like any part of the body, can be trained. The first step is understanding the nature of the suffering, seeing it for what it is, not as a personal failure, but as a universal human experience. In the next section, we'll see how Priya's invisible prison finally began to crack, and how her journey mirrors the struggles of so many Americans searching for freedom, not just in the world, but in their own minds. The breaking point. Every invisible prison eventually reaches a breaking point. For Priya, that moment came not with a dramatic event, but in the quiet, everyday chaos of American family life. It was a scene that could have played out in any home across the country: a teenager preparing for a crucial exam, a mother desperate for her child to succeed, and a family teetering on the edge of emotional exhaustion. Priya's son, Arjun, was in his final year of high school, facing the kind of pressure that has become all too familiar in the United States. College admissions, standardized tests, and the relentless competition. To stand out, these are the rites of passage for American teens. For Priya, the stakes felt impossibly high. She checked Arjun's grades daily, quizzed him on practice tests, and filled her home with reminders of what was at risk. In her mind, his future, and by extension, her family's happiness, hung in the balance. This kind of anxiety isn't unique to Priya. In fact, it's a reflection of a broader American story. The post-war era saw education become the great equalizer, the ticket to a better life. But as college became more competitive and expensive, the pressure on students and their parents intensified. Today, American families spend billions on tutoring, test prep, and extracurriculars, all in pursuit of a dream that sometimes feels just out of reach. The result? A generation of kids and parents alike overwhelmed by the fear of falling short. On the day of Arjun's big exam, the tension in the house was palpable. Priya's anxiety was contagious, spreading to her husband and daughter, turning what should have been a moment of support into a battleground of nerves. When Arjun returned home, Priya couldn't hold back. She peppered him with questions, dissected every answer, and, in a moment of frustration, uttered words she would regret. "If you don't pass, it's because you didn't take this seriously. I did everything for you. If you fail, it's your fault." The silence that followed was heavier than any argument. Arjun looked at his mother, not with anger, but with a kind of resignation, a quiet surrender that said more than words ever could. "You'll never be satisfied, will you, Mom?" "No matter what I do." He left the room, and Priya was left alone with the echo of her own fears. That night, as the city outside her window buzzed with life, Priya finally saw the cost of her anxiety. She realized she wasn't protecting her family, she was suffocating them. Her relentless drive for perfection, her inability to rest in the present, had turned her home into a pressure cooker. And the worst part, she recognized this pattern. She'd done it before with her husband, her daughter, even herself. The American pursuit of the best had become a weapon, not a shield. This was Priya's breaking point, but it's one that echoes in households across the country. The pressure to succeed, to provide, to never let your guard down. It's a uniquely American burden passed down from generation to generation. But in that moment of pain, Priya glimpsed a hard truth. The real enemy wasn't the world outside, but the storm inside her own mind. In the next section, we'll see what happens when the pressure becomes too much to bear, and how seeking help can be the first step toward breaking free from the cycle of anxiety that grips so many American families. Seeking help. For generations, Americans have prided themselves on self-reliance. The idea of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps is woven into the national identity, from the pioneers who crossed the Great Plains to the entrepreneurs who built Silicon Valley. But what happens when the weight of anxiety becomes too much for one person to carry alone? For Priya, the breaking point with her son was a wake-up call, a moment when she realized that the old American ideal of toughing it out wasn't working. She needed help, and for the first time, she was willing to ask for it. Her husband, who had watched the family dynamic shift under the pressure of Priya's anxiety, finally spoke up. "You need to talk to someone, Priya. This isn't just stress, it's affecting all of us." It was a difficult truth to hear, but it was also a turning. In the United States, seeking therapy has long carried a stigma, especially among communities that value privacy and resilience. But over the past few decades, that's begun to change. More Americans are recognizing that mental health is just as important as physical health, and that asking for help is a sign of strength, not weakness. Priya made an appointment with Dr. Patel, a therapist who understood both the pressure of American life and the cultural expectations that shaped Priya's experience. In their first session, Priya poured out her heart: the sleepless nights, the constant worry, the feeling that no matter how much she achieved, it was never enough. Dr. Patel listened patiently, then asked a question that cut through the noise. "Have you ever considered that your suffering isn't about your life, but about your mind?" It was a radical idea, one that challenged everything Priya had believed. In American culture, Problems are often seen as external, something to be fixed, solved, or overcome. But Dr. Patel introduced her to a different perspective, one rooted in both Eastern philosophy and modern neuroscience. She explained that the brain, especially the amygdala, can become so accustomed scanning for threats that it creates anxiety even when there's nothing wrong. You've trained your mind to expect disaster, Dr. Patel said. Now we need to train it to find peace. This approach was a revelation for Priya. For the first time, she saw her anxiety not as a personal failing, but as a pattern, a habit of mind that could be changed. Dr. Patel explained that just as Americans have learned to value physical fitness, there's a growing movement to prioritize mental fitness. Mindfulness, meditation, and therapy are no longer fringe ideas. They're becoming mainstream, embraced by everyone from Fortune 500 CEOs to high school students. Priya's journey was just beginning, but she was no longer alone. She was part of a new American story, one where seeking help is an act of courage and where healing begins by looking inward. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time, Priya felt a glimmer of hope. She realized that the invisible prison of anxiety could be unlocked, not by changing her circumstances, but by changing her relationship with her own mind. In the next section, we'll explore how understanding the mind's patterns and learning to train it can transform not just individual lives, but the very culture of American success. Understanding the mind's trap. Priya's first few sessions with Dr. Patel were like opening a door to a room she never knew existed. For years, she'd believed that if she just worked harder, organized better, or planned further ahead, the anxiety would finally disappear. But Dr. Patel introduced her to a new way of thinking, one that challenged the very foundation of the American fix-it mentality. In the United States, the idea of self-improvement is almost a religion. From the self-help boom of the 1980s to the rise of productivity gurus and life coaches, Americans have been taught that every problem has a solution, every weakness can be overcome. But what if the real problem isn't out there in the world, but inside the mind itself? Dr. Patel explained that the human brain, left untrained, is like a radio stuck between stations, always buzzing, never clear, always searching for the next thing to worry about. She introduced Priya to the concept of sankhara dukkha, a form of suffering described in ancient Buddhist texts but deeply relevant to modern American life. It's the suffering that comes not from real events, but from the mind's endless chatter, the constant desire for more, the fear of losing what you have, the urge to control every outcome. In a country built on ambition and achievement, this kind of suffering is everywhere. It's the parent who can't stop worrying about their child's future, the executive who lies awake at night, replay every decision, the student who feels like nothing is ever enough. Dr. Patel broke it down further, describing 3 forms of desire that fuel this mental trap. First, there's the craving for pleasure and new experiences, a drive that shaped everything from America's consumer culture to its obsession with entertainment and travel. Second, there's the desire to become someone better, to always be improving, achieving, and climbing higher. This is the engine behind the American dream, but it can also become a source of endless dissatisfaction. Third, there's the urge to eliminate discomfort, to push away anything unpleasant or uncertain. But the more you try to control or avoid pain, the more anxious you become. Priya realized that her mind was constantly cycling through these patterns. She wanted her family to be happy, her career to be secure, her life to be perfect. But every time she reached a goal, her mind immediately moved the finish line. It was like running a race with no end, always chasing, never arriving. Dr. Patel called this the drunken monkey mind, a metaphor that resonated with Priya. Her thoughts jumped from branch to branch, never settling, always restless. This wasn't just Priya's problem. It was a reflection of a broader American struggle, the culture of constant striving, the pressure to always be on, the fear of falling. Behind these forces shaped the way millions of Americans think and feel every day. But Dr. Patel offered hope. She explained that just as the body can be trained through exercise, the mind can be trained through mindfulness and awareness. The first step is noticing the patterns, seeing the mind's tricks for what they are, and learning to gently bring your attention back to the present. For Priya, this was both liberating and daunting. She saw that her suffering wasn't a personal flaw, but a universal human experience, one that's especially intense in a country that celebrates achievement above all else. The challenge ahead was clear: to break free from the mind's trap. She would need to learn a new way of being, one that valued presence over perfection and acceptance over endless striving. In the next section, we'll see how Priya began the hard work of retraining her mind and how small daily practices can start to unravel even the deepest patterns of anxiety in American life. The training begins. Priya's journey into retraining her mind didn't start with grand gestures or dramatic breakthroughs. Instead, it began with something deceptively simple: sitting still for 10 minutes each morning, focusing on her breath. Dr. Patel called it mental training and compared it to the way Americans had embraced physical fitness over the past century. Just as jogging and gym memberships became part of the national routine in the 1970s and 80s, mindfulness was now finding its place in the American lifestyle. At first, Priya was skeptical. She'd always been a doer, someone who measured her days by productivity and checked off lists. Sitting quietly felt unnatural, almost un-American in a culture that prizes action and achievement. But Dr. Patel explained that this was exactly the point. The mind, like any muscle, needed to be exercised in a new way, one that valued presence over constant motion. The first morning, Priya set her alarm for 5:30 a.m. before the rest of the house stirred. She sat on the edge of her bed, closed her eyes, and tried to focus on her breath. Within seconds, her mind was off to the races. Did Arjun finish his homework? What about that work email she forgot to send? Was there enough milk for breakfast? Each time she noticed her thoughts wandering, she gently brought her attention back to her breath. It was harder than she'd imagined. 10 minutes felt like an hour. But Dr. Patel had warned her, the goal isn't to stop your thoughts. It's to notice when you've been kidnapped by them, and to bring yourself back. Every time you do, you're building new pathways in your brain. This idea was backed by science. Priya learned about a Harvard study showing that regular mindfulness practice could actually shrink the amygdala, the brain's fear center, while strengthening areas responsible for learning and emotional regulation. It wasn't magic, it was neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to change itself. As the days passed, Priya noticed small shifts. She was still anxious, but she started to catch herself in the act. At dinner, when her mind drifted to tomorrow's deadlines, she'd pause, take a breath, and tried to really listen to her daughter's story about school. Sometimes she managed it for only a few seconds, but those moments felt different, like tiny islands of calm in a sea of worry. This practice wasn't just about meditation. Dr. Patel encouraged Priya to bring mindfulness into everyday life. When she walked the dog through her leafy neighborhood, she tried to notice the crunch of gravel underfoot, the cool morning air, the distant sound of a train. When she made coffee, she focused on the aroma, the warmth of the mug, the simple act of being present. These small acts of awareness began to add up, creating a sense of space between Priya and her anxious thoughts. Across America, this movement toward mindfulness was gaining momentum. From Wall Street executives to public school teachers, people were discovering that slowing down, even for a few minutes, could make a profound difference. Companies were offering meditation breaks, schools were teaching breathing exercises, and even the U.S. military was studying mindfulness to help soldiers manage stress. For Priya, the change was gradual but real. She wasn't cured of anxiety, but she was learning to live with it differently. She realized that the American obsession with fixing and achieving had its place, but so did the ancient wisdom of simply being. Each morning she sat. Each time she brought her mind back to the present, she was quietly rewriting the story of her life. In the next section, we'll see how these small daily practices began to ripple outward, transforming not just Priya's inner world, but her relationship and her sense of what it means to truly live the American dream. Small steps, real change. As Priya continued her daily mindfulness practice, she began to notice something that felt almost revolutionary. In the context of her American upbringing, real change didn't come from dramatic overhauls or overnight transformation. Instead, it came from small, consistent steps, tiny shifts in awareness that slowly built up over time. This idea, though rooted in ancient wisdom, echoed a distinctly American tradition, the belief in incremental progress. Throughout U.S. history, some of the most significant changes have come not from sudden revolutions, but from steady, persistent effort. The civil rights movement, for example, was not a single event, but a series of small, courageous actions, sit-ins, marches, court cases that eventually reshaped the nation. The same could be said for the women's suffrage movement, environmental reforms, and even the rise of Silicon Valley, where innovation is often the result of countless failed experiments and gradual improvement. Priya's journey mirrored this pattern. At first, her progress felt almost invisible. She still had anxious mornings and restless nights, but slowly, she found herself reacting differently to the everyday stresses that once overwhelmed her. When her daughter spilled juice on the kitchen floor, Priya paused before snapping. She took a breath, remembered her practice, and responded with patience. When her husband came home late from work, she noticed the familiar surge of irritation, but let it pass without turning it into an argument. These small victories began to accumulate. At work, Priya found she could focus more easily, even when deadlines loomed. She started to enjoy her lunch breaks, taking time to walk outside instead of eating at her desk. She even reconnected with old friends, realizing that she'd been so consumed by worry that she'd neglected the relationships that once brought her joy. One evening, as the family gathered for dinner, Priya's daughter, Maya, excitedly shared a story about her science project. For the first time in a long while, Priya was truly present, listening, laughing and asking questions. Maya noticed the difference. "You're really here tonight, Mom," she said, her eyes shining. It was a small moment, but for Priya it felt monumental. This approach, focusing on being just a little better each day, reminded Priya of the Japanese concept of Kaizen, which had been embraced by American businesses in the late 20th century. Kaizen means continuous improvement, the idea that progress is made through steady, incremental changes rather than giant leaps. It's a philosophy that helped transform American manufacturing and management, and now it was transforming Priya's life. She realized that she didn't need to become a perfect mother, wife, or professional overnight. She just needed to show up, do her best, and be a little more present than she was yesterday. This mindset took the pressure off, allowing her to appreciate the journey instead of obsessing over the destination. Across the country, more Americans are discovering the power of small steps. Whether it's learning a new skill, building healthier habits, or healing from emotional pain, the path to real change is rarely a straight line. It's a series of ups and downs, setbacks and breakthroughs, all adding up to something greater over time. For Priya, these small steps were the foundation of a new way of living, one that honored both her American drive for progress and the timeless wisdom of being present. In the next section, we'll see how finding a deeper sense of purpose, her own Ikigai, helped Priya stay motivated even when the journey got tough. Kaizen and Ikigai. As Priya's journey unfolded, she discovered that small steps alone weren't enough. She needed a reason to keep going, especially on the hard days. That's when Dr. Patel introduced her to two powerful ideas that, while rooted in Japanese philosophy, had already found a home in American culture: Kaizen and Ikigai. Kaizen, meaning continuous improvement, had revolutionized American industry decades earlier. In the 1980s, as U.S. manufacturers faced fierce competition from Japan, they adopted Kaizen to transform their factories. Instead of chasing perfection overnight, they focused on making things just a little better each day. This approach didn't just save companies, it sparked a management revolution, showing Americans that progress is a process, not a finish line. Priya saw how this philosophy could apply to her own life. She didn't need to become a new person overnight. She just needed to be 1% more present, 1% more patient, 1% more compassionate than she was yesterday. This mindset was liberating. It took the pressure off and made change feel possible, even on days when anxiety threatened to pull her back into old habits. But Kaizen alone wasn't enough. Dr. Patel encouraged Priya to find her Ikigai, her reason for being. In America, the search for purpose is as old as the country itself. From the pioneers who crossed the continent in search of a better life, to the civil rights leaders who fought for justice, Americans have always been driven by a sense of mission. But in the rush of daily life, it's easy to lose sight of what truly matters. For Priya, her Ikigai became clear: her family. She wanted to be present for her children, to build a home filled with warmth and connection, not just achievement and anxiety. She wanted her kids to remember her as a mother who listened, who laughed, who showed up, not just as someone who worried about their future. This purpose became her anchor, something to return to whenever she felt lost or overwhelmed. Across the United States, more people are embracing the idea that purpose fuels perseverance. Veterans returning from service find new meaning in helping others. Retirees discover joy in volunteering. Young professionals seek careers that align with their values, not just their bank accounts. The American dream is evolving, not just about material success, but about living a life of meaning. Priya wrote her Ikigai on a sticky note and placed it on her bathroom mirror: be present for my family. Each morning, as she sat for her 10 minutes of mindfulness, she reminded herself why she was doing this work. It wasn't just for her own peace of mind, but for the people she loved most. This combination of Kaizen and Ikigai gave Priya the resilience to keep going even when progress felt slow. She learned to celebrate small victories: a calm conversation at dinner, a moment of laughter with her husband, a peaceful walk in the park. These moments, once lost in the noise of anxiety, became the building blocks of a new life. In the next section, we'll see how Priya faced setbacks and relapses, and how the lessons of Kaizen and Ikigai helped her navigate the inevitable ups and downs of real change, just as countless Americans have done throughout history. Relapse and resilience: no journey of change is ever a straight line, and Priya's was no exception. Just as she began to feel the benefits of mindfulness and the steady rhythm of Kaizen, life threw her a curveball, a challenge as American as it gets: work stress. A major project at her tech company suddenly went off the rails. Deadlines tightened, emails piled up, and late nights became the norm. The old patterns of anxiety crept back in, almost unnoticed at first, like weeds reclaiming a garden. Priya found herself skipping her morning meditation, telling herself she didn't have time. She snapped at her husband over trivial things and barely listened to her children at dinner. The progress she'd made seemed to evaporate overnight. The voice of self-doubt returned, whispering that she'd failed, that she'd never really changed. It was a familiar American refrain, the pressure to be perfect, to never falter, to always be on. But this time, something was different. Priya remembered the lessons of Kaizen and Ikigai. She realized that setbacks weren't signs of failure, but part of the process. American history is filled with stories of resilience in the face of adversity. The Great Depression, for example, tested the nation's spirit, but it also gave rise to a culture of perseverance and innovation. Civil rights leaders faced countless setbacks, but each time they got back up, their movement grew stronger. Priya decided to treat her relapse not as a defeat, but as an opportunity to practice resilience. She scheduled an emergency session with Dr. Patel, who reassured her that relapses are a natural part of any journey. Even the most disciplined minds wander, Dr. Patel said. The point isn't to never fall, but to always get back up. With renewed determination, Priya returned to her morning practice, even if it was just for 5 minutes. She apologized to her family for her short temper and explained that she was struggling but trying. This honesty brought them closer, reminding her that vulnerability is a strength, not a weakness. A lesson echoed in the stories of countless Americans who have faced hardship and found connection through openness. Slowly, the fog of anxiety began to lift. Priya found that each time she returned to her practice, it became a little easier. She learned to forgive herself for her imperfections, to see progress in the act of returning, not just in uninterrupted success. This mindset shift was transformative. Instead of measuring her worth by how few mistakes she made, she began to value her ability to recover, to adapt, to keep moving forward. Across the country, more people are embracing this kind of resilience. From entrepreneurs who bounce back after failed startups to families rebuilding after natural disasters, the American story is one of persistence in the face of setbacks. Priya's journey was now part of that larger narrative, a reminder that real change is messy, non-linear, and deeply human. In the next section, we'll witness Priya's real turning point, a moment when her new mindset is put to the test, and she discovers the true power of presence and acceptance in the heart of her American life. The real turning point, the true test of change, often comes when we least expect it. For Priya, that moment arrived on a quiet Saturday morning, wrapped in the kind of anticipation that's familiar to families across America, the arrival of a college acceptance letter. Arjun, her son, stood at the kitchen table, a sealed envelope trembling in his hands. The air was thick with hope and anxiety, a rite of passage for so many American teens and their parents. In the past, Priya would have been consumed by worry, peppering Arjun with questions, her own fears spilling over into his big moment. But this time, something was different. As she watched her son, she felt the familiar wave of anxiety rising. What if he didn't get in? What if he was disappointed? What if she failed him as a mother? But instead of letting those thoughts take over, Priya paused. She took a slow, steady breath, grounding herself in the present. She remembered her Ikigai, her purpose, and the lessons of Kaizen. This moment wasn't about controlling the outcome or protecting her son from disappointment. It was about being there fully for whatever happened next. She looked at Arjun and said, "No matter what's in that envelope, I'm proud of you. I'm proud of your effort, your courage, and the person you are becoming." Arjun's eyes widened in surprise. For the first time, he felt his mother's support without the weight of her expectation. He opened the letter, hands shaking, and a smile broke across his face. "I got in, Mom. I did it." The family erupted in celebration, but for Priya, the real victory wasn't the acceptance letter. It was the connection she felt with her son, a sense of peace that came from being present. In the moment, that night, as the city lights of San Francisco glimmered outside her window, Priya reflected on how far she'd come. She realized that the American dream she'd been chasing wasn't about achievements or accolades. It was about moments like this, moments of genuine connection, love, and acceptance. She wrote in her journal, "Today, I chose to be present instead of anxious. I discovered that the life I have is exactly the life I always wanted. I just needed to stop living in the future long enough to see it." Priya's turning point echoed a broader shift happening across the country. More Americans are beginning to question the relentless pursuit of more and are seeking meaning in the everyday. Movements like slow living and mindful parenting are gaining traction, encouraging families to savor the present rather than rush toward the next milestone. Schools are teaching mindfulness to students, and workplaces are offering wellness programs that focus on mental health, not just productivity. This cultural shift is a reminder that the American story is always evolving. The dream isn't static, it grows and changes with each generation. For Priya, The real turning point wasn't a single event, but a new way of seeing her life. She learned that presence is more powerful than perfection, and that true happiness comes not from what we achieve, but from how we show up for the people we love. In the next section, we'll see how Priya's transformation continued, and how her new approach to life began to ripple outward, touching her family, her work, and her community, proving that real change, no matter how small, can shape the future of the American dream. Transformation and takeaway. 3 months after Priya first sat down with Dr. Patel, her life looked much the same from the outside. She still lived in her Bay Area home, still juggled work deadlines and family dinners, and still faced the everyday challenges that come with raising a family in modern America. But inside, everything had changed. The anxious current that once ran beneath every moment had slowed, replaced by a sense of presence and acceptance that felt both unfamiliar and deeply right. Priya's transformation wasn't about erasing anxiety from her life. In fact, she learned that anxiety, like so many emotions, is simply part of being human. What changed was her relationship to it. Instead of thinking, "I am anxious," she began to notice, "I am feeling anxious." That small shift, one of language and perspective, made all the difference. It was the difference between being swept away by a storm and learning to stand in the rain, knowing it would pass. This new approach rippled outward, touching every part of her life. At work, Priya found herself less reactive, more able to focus on solutions rather than spiraling into worst-case scenarios. She became a better listener, not just to her colleagues but to herself. At home, her children noticed the change. Maya, her daughter, felt more comfortable sharing her worries, knowing her mother would listen without judgment or pressure. Arjun, once distant, began to open up again, trusting that his mother's love wasn't conditional on his achievements. Priya's husband, too, felt the difference. Their conversations grew deeper, less about logistics and more about dreams, fears, and the small joys of daily life. The family began to create new rituals: Sunday hikes in the redwoods, screen-free dinners, evenings spent reading together. These moments, once overshadowed by anxiety, became the foundation of a new kind of American dream, one built not on constant striving, but on connection and presence. Priya's story is a reflection of a broader shift happening across the United States. As more Americans confront the limits of endless achievement, they are rediscovering the value of being present. The rise of mindfulness, the popularity of therapy, and the growing conversation around mental health are signs that the culture is changing. People are beginning to understand that success isn't just about what you have, but how you experience your life. This transformation is rooted in American history, from the transcendentalists like Emerson and Thoreau, who urged people to live deliberately, to the civil rights leaders who found strength in community and purpose. The American story has always included voices calling for a deeper, more meaningful way of living. Today, that call is being answered in new ways, as families like Priya's learn to balance ambition with acceptance and progress with presence. Priya's journey is a reminder that you don't have to change your entire life to find peace. Sometimes the most profound transformations come from small shifts in perspective, repeated day after day. It's the practice of Kaizen, continuous improvement, and the power of Ikigai, living with purpose. It's the courage to seek help, the humility to start again after setbacks, and the wisdom to know that happiness is found not in the future, but in the moments we choose to be fully alive. As Priya looked back on her journey, she realized that the American dream she'd inherited was never about having it all. It was about learning to appreciate what she already had, and to share that gratitude with the people she loved. Her story is an invitation to all of us to slow down, to be present, and to remember that the life we want is often the one we're already living, if only we have the courage to see it. In the final section, we'll reflect on how Priya's experience offers hope and guidance for anyone struggling with anxiety or dissatisfaction, and how the lessons she learned can help shape a more mindful, connected future for all Americans. Priya's story is more than just a personal journey. It's a mirror reflecting the silent struggles of millions of Americans. In a nation that has always celebrated ambition, innovation, and the pursuit of happiness, it's easy to forget that true fulfillment often comes not from chasing the next milestone, but from learning to be present in the life you already have. The American story is filled with pioneers, dreamers, and doers, but it's also filled with quiet moments of reflection, resilience, and connection. If you find yourself relating to Priya, if you have a good job, a loving family, and a comfortable home, yet still feel a persistent sense of anxiety or emptiness, you're not alone. This is a uniquely modern American dilemma, one that has grown alongside the country's rapid progress. The pressure to have it all can become a trap, turning even the most fortunate lives into a source of stress and self-doubt. But as Priya discovered, there is a way out. It doesn't require abandoning your dreams or giving up on success. Instead, it asks you to shift your focus inward, to train your mind with the same dedication that built cities, launched companies, and sent astronauts to the moon. The practice of mindfulness, the philosophy of Kaizen, and the search for Ikigai are not just for concepts, they are tools that Americans are increasingly using to reclaim their well-being. Throughout history, Americans have adapted to new challenges by embracing new ideas. The rise of therapy and mental health awareness in the 21st century is just the latest chapter in a long tradition of self-improvement and reinvention. From the self-reliance of the frontier to the community spirit of the civil rights era, the nation has always found strength in both individual effort and collective support. So what can you do if you recognize yourself in Priya's story? Start small. Take a few minutes each day to simply notice your breath, your thoughts, and the world around you. Practice being present with your loved ones, even if it's just for a single meal or conversation. Remember that progress is not about perfection, but about showing up again and again, one day at a time. Reflect on your own Ikigai, your reason for being. What truly matters to you? Who are you doing this for? Let that purpose guide you through the inevitable ups and downs. And when you stumble, as everyone does, remember that resilience is built not by never falling, but by always getting back up. Finally, don't be afraid to reach out for help. Whether it's a trusted friend, a therapist, or a supportive community, connection is at the heart of healing. Share your story, listen to others, and know that you are part of a larger movement. A new American dream that values presence, purpose, and peace of mind. As we close Priya's story, let it serve as a gentle reminder. The life you want may already be within reach. Sometimes the greatest act of courage is to pause, breathe, and truly see the beauty of the present moment. In a country that's always looking forward, perhaps the most radical thing you can do is to be here now. Thank you for watching and reflecting. If Priya's journey resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might be the encouragement someone else needs. And remember, be present, walk with honor, and follow your own path one mindful step at a time.